So we had to swap. With this session. We have two speakers who will be allocated 20 minutes each, and I'm going to introduce them to you, and thereafter they will also join me on the high table. I will request that you lend me your ears so that you hear them very well. If there are any questions, please send them across so we can get them answered and responded equally well. We all know that training is basically teaching or developing oneself or the others. We need to develop skills. We need to develop our knowledge relating to our particular competencies. As far as what the outcome should be is that we should reduce our reliance on outside experts. We should encourage action on local issues by ourselves. We must be able to mobilize our internal resources. And finally, each one of us, it is a must, it is mandatory that we transfer our skills to the youthful who are going to be the pride of the country. Fellow engineers, I would like to introduce to you a very versatile speaker, immediate past President, Engineer Advocate Menyemanga. He holds Master of Science in Design and Production from the University of Lagos, Nigeria. He holds BSc Mechanical Engineering from our own University of Dar es Salaam. He also has ventured into the legal practice. He has a Bachelor of Law degree from the Open University of Tanzania, and he holds postgraduate diploma in legal practice from the Law School of Tanzania. Engineer Manga is a registered consulting engineer. He's a past president of the Association of Consulting Engineers Tanzania. He is the immediate past president of the Institution of Engineers Tanzania. Further to that, he is an accredited arbitrator with the Registration of Arbitrators Tanzania, member of arbitration panels with the National Construction Council, with the Tanzania Institute of Arbitrators, FIDIC National, as well as SADC. So may I request you to join your hands to welcome our versatile speaker and presenter today, Engineer Menyemanga. However, to sum it up, Engineer Menyemanga is also standing for our Professor Awadh Mawenya. Unfortunately, he could not join us because of his ill health. He is well known to all of us as a director of the Design Partnership, a firm which is running. He's a consulting engineer and a fellow of Institution of Engineers Tanzania, as well as fellow of Institution of Civil Engineers UK. As a former dean of the University of Dar es Salaam, we were very encouraged to see him training us, and I believe that the paper he has asked Engineer Menyemanga to present will be very useful to all of us. So without much ado, I would like first to start with the presenter, Engineer Menyemanga. Please.
Good morning. Good morning to all of you. I've been duly introduced, so I'll just move forward with the paper. As it has been stated, I'm standing on Professor Mawenya's shoes, and I'll endeavor to present this paper the way in which he would have preferred doing. So when the institution asked me to step in to represent Professor Mawenya, before I read his paper, I gave him a call. So in order to understand the concepts behind the paper, so that when I read it, I fully understand the paper. And I had a telephone conversation with him for about 15 minutes, and he gave me the gist of the concepts of the paper, which now I think is probably the best approach, as I don't think most of us have had the time to go through the paper. So I will start with the concepts behind the paper as presented by Professor Mawenya himself. And then, if time allows, I'll go through the slides. Now, when I'm talking about the concepts, I will want us to, is this triangle or pyramid visible? I'm not sure whether with the overhead is working. Is it visible? Is it visible? Is the overhead working? No. Okay, if it's not working, you can go to your booklets, page number 61. Page number 61, you'll see a pyramid there. It's called Figure 1, and it is titled Proficiency Level of Engineering Practice. Now, and just remain at that page, and I don't know, organizer, you tell me when the screen is on, otherwise I may not use it eventually. Now, the title of the presentation is called Enhancing Skills and Proficiency of Professional Engineers in Tanzania Through Work. And there are two fundamental concepts that you can pick from his paper, which I'm going to state now. Concept number one is that professionalism in Tanzania is deteriorating. Professionalism in Tanzania is deteriorating, and that people are very comfortable in the state which they are working, and as a result, they are not very efficient, and they are not utilizing the full potential which they have. Now, he says that he has made this observation, not only in the engineering profession, but in many other professions. And he just gave me an example of the land planning profession, and he asked a question, why is it we're having squatter areas growing around our cities instead of having planned cities? Now, and he says is that because people are not working professionals the way which they should. And they are very comfortable in delivering minimum of what they could or what they can deliver. So he came up with this pyramid focusing on the competence level of an engineering profession. Now, if you look at the pyramid, it is about 6 levels, but if you read his paper, he only describes 3 levels. Because he has combined level 1 and level 2, that is the student and the apprenticeship graduate student. And he called this level as a level where one acquires the engineering knowledge. And it is equivalent to the graduate and the SIP training or whatever kind of training which you're having post-graduation. And then he went further and combined level 3 and level 4, and he called it a professional practice. But specifically, he called it the conventional professional practice, in which engineers are only involved in solving routine problems on a daily basis, problems that are not challenging, and they're comfortable staying in that area. And this is actually a concern that if we are really to move further, we should strive to be able to solve more complex problems. Now, these two levels, which we call the conventional professional engineering practice, or the professional engineering practice, which involves now, we would say, at the level of professional engineers or registered professional engineers, or even consulting engineers, whom he referred to as specialists or experts. Now, the concern here is that I was trying to say at the level of conventional professional practice, most engineers, that's where he says about 80%, if you read the paper, 80% of us are operating at that level, is that we are only concerned with routine work, which actually does not contribute much towards the development of the profession or development of the nation as a whole. And so the effort should be to strive to go beyond that level, which now he called the creative transformational level of engineer, where we'll be involved in creative and inventive kind of solution to complex problems. As I said, just keep an eye on the chart, either in your booklet or on the overhead projector, so that we could understand what I'm speaking. Now, the thinking is that the professionals are the custodian of the profession, and that it is the profession who will develop that profession, and also will be involved in the development of the nation. And that a professional who is allowing himself to work below his level is actually killing the profession, and is also not helping towards development of the nation. So if you are operating anywhere up to level 4, you are likely not contributing too much, or contributing much to the profession, or contributing to the development of the country. Now, he said engineers really need to improve and need to add value to their competence. And he says this will come through work. And hence, if you read the title of the presentation, is competence through works. So that was the first concept, is that professionalism is going away really, because people are working at a level which they're not really very effective and not making any change in the profession, or even contributing in the development of the country. Now, and he said, how do you now develop? They say you develop through work. Is that by working, one grows. You gain experience, you gain competence, and you realize your potential. And if you read the paper, he eventually defines work as professional engineering practice at the end of the day. So he went further and explained what is professional excellency and what is ethics. And he made a conclusion, which I will now revert back to the slides. And see what he has prepared. I don't know how many more minutes I will have. Okay. So I'll just go very fast through the slides. He started by presenting an introduction. So let me make sure. Okay, introduction to the background and justification, which is what I've presented as concept number 1. And then he went and discussed further what is work. And essentially he says work is a human necessity. Is what releases the potential of anybody. While reading this, I was reflecting, how does work really release potential? And I liken it to a football player who is always in the reserve bench. So you cannot know his competence really unless he plays in the field. So it's just like work. Your competence as an engineer can only be seen, can only be developed once you are in the field and working. And he went further on to define what is the meaning of success. Some people work so that they become success, but success has different definitions. Some define it as probably getting money, getting fame, getting property, and so forth. But he defines success as actually achieving your potential, which is God-given. And engineer should be always at one time or another thinking of this area. If you're a mechanical engineer like me, you need to look out for competent mechanical engineers who could mentor you through your path towards the top of the pyramid. And now another issue is the issue of the self-confidence and effectiveness. Without these, you cannot really move up. First of all, you have to build your self-confidence internally and also externally, in the sense that people whom you're offering services should be able to have that confidence to use you. And there's a question of mindset, that self-confidence has to do with a mindset. So we need to change that mindset that the better engineering or engineering products come from abroad and not from us. We should be able to believe that we can deliver engineering products at all levels. And then we went on further to discuss on professional ethics and issues of code of conduct. This professional ethics and codes of conduct, for your information, are more or less universal. If you read the professional codes of and conducts of ERB, IET, ASSET, IEK, and many other institutions, they are more identical. They call for your integrity, for honesty in whatever you do. They call for your high standard of performance, you know, and they call for your continuous professional development. Yeah, they call for your mentorship of the young professionals. So all these issues which should be part and parcel of an engineer's professional life. Now, if you read now his paper, what he's saying, what is lacking in this is that not much is spoken in these codes on excellency. So he's proposing that excellency should be a component of the professional codes of conduct and ethics, and that everyone should strive, you know, to start every task and assignment by thinking how it is better, to do it better than it's ever been done before, and so that we stick on at making sure that quality work is what we achieve to perform. Okay, thank you. And we should also strive to continue doing the right, regardless of what others think. And this is a very important concept. If you're a professional, you're striving for competence, you're striving for excellency, you'll do the right thing regardless of what others think. Now, in conclusion, and I will read his conclusion, which says that every professional engineer is capable of extending him or herself to the maximum potential. We have that potential. And he said it's not enough for a professional engineer to be contented with merely consuming what others create and then retreat into a shell of limited goals and immediate pleasures. So if we are contented with our routine works that does not require any creativity, then he says that is immediate pleasures. It had no values to the development of the country or the profession. And the last one, it is unacceptable for professional engineers to alienate themselves from their natural inclination. Doing so will diminish their contribution to national transformation and can only lead to pain and disappointment in the long run upon realizing that they have wasted something very unique. Now, I will just explain what this really means. What he's saying here is that you may be doing something in the engineering profession that does not really add value in terms of the knowledge in the profession, or probably even not much that does not contribute so much to development, but it's something which gives you certain satisfaction in terms of money, wealth, maybe fame, and so forth. But what he's saying here, that at the end of the day, you will regret when you will realize that you did not use your potential to the fullest as an engineer to develop the profession and the country. And that's how it ends. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Menyamanga, for a very great presentation. And engineers, I would like to remind you that if you have any questions, please send them across. We will have enough time to discuss on your questions, and the responses will come through our able presenters. May I now take this opportunity to invite Engineer Kibeshi Emmanuel Kiabo to the high table. Engineer Kiabo is a highly skilled engineer with multitasking capability. He has BSc Civil Engineering from the University of Dar es Salaam. Thereafter, he pursued MSc in Construction Management, same University of Dar es Salaam. Then he went for PhD in Business Administration. So we can comfortably call him as Dr. Kibeshi. He is a member of the Institution of Engineers Tanzania and also a registered professional engineer with the Engineers Registration Board. May I invite you to the floor, please? His topic today is corruption in construction industry in emerging economies, sources, effects, and interventions in construction projects. Please, a huge round of applause for him as he takes the floor. Meanwhile, as they are having some IT challenges, may I request that when you send your questions across, ensure that you have included your name so that we can refer this accordingly.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity. And having heard a lot from the previous presentations, especially on technical aspects of our profession, let us now move ahead to have a little bit a look on the ethical and integrity part of the coin of our profession, specifically on corruption in construction industry, in emerging economies, sources, effects, and interventions in construction industry. This presentation is divided into 6 sections. I will take you from the introduction, thereafter to the sources of corruption, then to the effects of corruption, and then to the interventions to curb corruption. Thereafter, I will have a comparison between the ethical codes as provided by ERB and IET and the Prevention and the Combating of Corruption Act, number 11 of 2007. Thereafter, I will go to the conclusions and recommendations. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not disputed that the construction industry has an important role in the contribution or promotion of socio-economic development, especially on the creation of jobs and the contribution to the GDP, and indeed to the maintenance and the creation of built environment. Despite the importance, it is also not disputed that contribution of the industry to the GDP is sometimes interrupted by corrupt practices. In this regard, corruption poses a risk on sustainability of nationals' lower middle income status, which was attained in the year 2020. However, even before independence and after independence, several legal and institutional measures have been put in place for the sake of eradicating corruption in various sectors, including the construction industry. Despite all these measures, poor project performance is still perceived as a result of corruption. I hereby admit that poor performance does not solely depend on corruption, but also in other factors, but corruption is among them. Examples of perceived indicators of corruption are hereby listed. The first one is rejection of projects, especially for foundation stone laying and inauguration during Uhuru Torch races, kipindi cha mbio za mwenge. Miradi mingi inakataliwa. For example, in the year 2018, we had 80 projects with the value of 27.5 billion were rejected. In 2019, we had 107 projects with the value of around 9.2 billion were also rejected. We all know in the year 2020, we had no mbio za mwenge due to the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. But in the year 2021, again, we had 52 projects worth of 29.8 billion were also Rejected. Yes. Okay. Sorry for some technical issues. I will come back. Okay? Yes, the second indicator is the inflation of project construction values. For example, the cost for Mwanjelwa market in Mbeya region rose from 13 billion to 26 billion, and this was detected in the year 2016. And again, we had a 1.8 kilometer road construction project, which was constructed at a tune of 5.5 billion. This was detected in 2021. All of this and others are perceived as a result of corrupt practices in the construction industry. Sources of corruption can be divided into various categories, but for the sake of this presentation, I have streamlined to the three categories. These are project characteristics, including but not limited to great project complexity, project size and uniqueness, number of contractual links. We have another dimension under these characteristics is project interference by government officials. This is very obvious. Another category is regulatory aspects. This includes lack of professional ethics and codes of conduct, inadequate sanctions, weak regulatory systems, and lack of competitive and equitable bidding practices and procedures. Lastly are personal factors, which include negative leader roles, encouragement, illegitimate gains, and lack of rigorous supervision. Corruption does not affect only the project life cycle. It goes beyond to the infrastructure service. Under project life cycle stage, corruption delays project delivery times. You all know, reduces efficiency by favoring construction firms, which are corrupt. And on the part of infrastructure service, corruption reduces the quality of infrastructure service, increases the operating cost of such infrastructures, and reduces the potential economy of such infrastructures. Let us have a look now on the interventions to curb corruption. This can also be classified into various categories, but for the sake of this presentation, I have again grouped them into three categories. The first one is regulatory interventions, which includes enforcement of laws like the Prevention and the Combating of Corruption Act, regulations and sanctions, but also enforcement of ethical codes of conduct among engineers, development of strong political and ethical will, especially in enforcement of existing strategies, anti-corruption policies and laws. The second category is managerial interventions, which include transparency mechanisms, accountability system, high integrity and honest construction culture, good governance, and the strengthening of professional institutions such as ERB, IET, and other institutions. Lastly, on this category is the community awareness. It is well known, education is a powerful weapon to combat this world. It is perceived that training and development initiatives, raising awareness, publication of contracts, and effective reporting channels are powerful weapons in fighting corruption. Let us now have a comparison between the ethical codes and the PCCA or the Prevention and the Combating of Corruption Act, number 11 of 2007. My argument here is the Act and the Codes of Conduct, all of them overlap to each other. For that case, if engineers can voluntarily adhere or comply to the codes of ethics and conduct, we don't expect an engineer to be accused of corruption. Are we together? Now, under this comparison, I've taken the first part using the ERB Code of Ethics and the Conduct of Engineers 2013, and I have outlined some corruption offenses on the second column of that table you can see on slide number 8. To start with, let me explain a little bit on section 15. What do we mean by offense under section 15 of this act? Section 15 prohibits receiving and offering of bribes. And section 22 prohibits use of documents intended to mislead the principal. And the section obtaining of advantage without lawful consideration. And the section 31 prohibits abuse of position, whereby a public official uses his authority to do or not to do an act in violation of law. Having introduced such offenses, now let's go to the regulations. Those parts of the codes of conduct and ethics are not called section or even articles. They are regulations in principle. So regulation 3A, I have tried to summarize the provisions for the sake of presentation. You want for details, go to my paper or go to the code itself. You will read a lot and you will learn a lot for compliance in future days. Regulation 3A, an engineer shall advance engineering profession by being honest and impartial. Violation of this goes to section 15, section 22, and section 23 of the Act. So if you adhere to this regulation, then such provisions in the law will not apply to you. This is a very good message to you. Another regulation is 4C. Every engineer shall issue public statements only in an objective and a truthful manner. This goes along with section 22. We don't expect an engineer to go to the streets and have a mic like this one and say this project is so and so and so. We expect you to write through writings. And once such writings are false or misleading, then you go to section 22 of the Prevention and the Combating of Corruption Act. Regulation 5.2. Every engineer shall approve engineering documents which are in conformity with the appropriate standards, failure of which you will be committing an offense under section 31, which is the abuse of position, doing anything or failing to do an act in violation of law. Regulation 5.4. Every engineer shall be objective and truthful in making or presenting professional reports, statements, or testimonies. Section 22. I have explained. Regulation 6.3. No engineer shall solicit or accept valuable consideration from contractors or other parties in connection with the work. This can go either to section 15 or section 23, which is obtaining advantage without lawful consideration. ERB code goes on. Regulation 9. No engineer shall be influenced in his professional duties. He shall not accept financial or other considerations. Section 15 and section 23 apply as well. Regulation 12. No engineer shall accept a professional commission under circumstances in which his professional judgment may be compromised. This again goes to section 23. Regulation 14, subdivision 2B. An engineer shall not associate with the Engineers Legislation Act, and for that case, you will be committing an offense under section 31, which is the abuse of position by doing or failing to do an act in a violation of law. Let us have a look now on the IET Code of Conduct and Ethics for Engineering Practice. Regulation number 10 also states, an engineer shall neither offer nor accept cover payments or other considerations for the purpose of securing assignments. That goes straight to section 15. Regulation 17, a practicing engineer shall not improperly solicit work or nor shall be improperly pay any person. Section 15, bribes. Regulation 18, an engineer shall not accept remuneration in connection with professional services other than from his employer or with his consent. Section 23, obtaining of advantage without lawful consideration. And lastly, Regulation 20, a practicing engineer shall not assist, induce, or be involved in the breach of this code. Again, this goes to section 31. Ladies and gentlemen, let me give you this good news. If at all we are committed to be smart engineers, let us go back to the adherence of the codes of conduct and ethics for engineers. Thereafter, don't expect any PCB officer or any member of the public to accuse you from a corruption offense. So, it is my argument that the code of conduct and ethics for engineers, whether of IET or ERB, is very powerful in fighting corruption in construction projects and engineering in general. In concluding this presentation, let us have a look on these two figures. Figure 1 shows the sources and effects of corruption in construction projects, whereby we have the project characteristics, regulatory aspects, and personal factors. All of these have direct influence on corruption, and the corruption affects both the project life cycle and the infrastructure service, as I have narrated. Figure number 2 shows the interventions to curb corruption in construction projects, where we have the regulatory, community awareness, and managerial interventions, which have direct and indirect influence on ethical culture, which when is respected, then we don't expect an engineer to become corrupt. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me, before I conclude, before I wind up this presentation, to make the following recommendations. 1, according to the Prevention and the Combating of Corruption Act, number 11 of 2007, PCCB is mandated to cooperate with various stakeholders in fighting corruption in this country. So it is my recommendation for inception of formal cooperation between PCCB, ERB, IET, and other institutions through Memoranda of Understanding, that is MOUs, as we witnessed yesterday between IET and ASSET. Another recommendation is the effective implementation of codes of conduct and ethics for engineers. This goes straight to the management of ERB and IET to make sure that these codes of ethics and conduct are respected and complied by all engineers. Lastly, I understand that most of engineers, not all, work as contractors or employed by contractors. It is my argument that CRB now should use various initiatives to make sure that it promotes a high or strong ethical culture among construction firms. Honorable Chairman and all members of the floor, having said so, thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. How can we ensure capacity building and transfer of requisite skills to raise potential of our young engineers?
Okay, thank you very much, Engineer Rizwan Kadri, President, Institution of Engineers, Tanzania. Let me respond by saying that this question can be broken down into two. in respect to of the young engineers. You have young engineers who are already in employment, and we have young engineers who are not in employment. Now, engineers who are already in employment should strive to achieve the growth as outlined in the pyramid. Now, and this will be through attitudinal kind of approach or personal professional development. This question is related to another question which I have. You see, once you're employed, it has to be up to you to try and move through the ladder and not wait to be pushed. You have to be aggressive, looking out for information, doing the things which you ought to do for you to grow. Now, the second aspect of this question is in respect of the young engineers or young professionals who are not employed. Now, this is an issue in Tanzania. It's a national issue which even us as an institution of engineers, ERB, we're all concerned and using all means possible to try and create this opportunity for young engineers through projects or through training attachments with companies. And I think this effort will continue. I don't think we can have a straight answer now. I know I also sit in the Engineers Registration Board. We are also fighting hard with the government to get as much engineers involved in these strategic projects. And I think quite a number of places have already been given, but again, it's not enough. The production of engineers annually is now very high, and our industry and projects cannot absorb all of them at a go, but these efforts are being done. The second question is similar. The author did not say his name or her name, but I'll just read. It says, self-confidence and professionalism are strengthened through practical or practice. However, practical training is nowadays very weak. What is your suggestion on what should be done to widen practical training in industry? This is what I said. Efforts by professional institutions, efforts by the Engineers Registration Board, engagement of the government, engagement of the private sector to create opening for the engineers to practice. This is what has to be done. Question number 3 came from Mr. Baraka Michael, which says, in what extent does professional engineers enhance young engineers during their initial professional development? Your opinion, please. As I answered in the first question, once a young engineer is engaged to be mentored by a professional, it is up to the young engineer to push the professional to gain as much as possible. I don't think it's the professional who should push the young engineer. When I say young engineer, now I used to be very specific. There are people who graduated several years ago but have never had professional practice experience. So they are also referred to as young engineers. I remember maybe 20 years ago or so, we got an engineer in our company who was working in a government department, and her role was to sign off fuel for vehicles and sign off machines. She was not doing any engineering, and she wanted to practice engineering. So she joined our company, and through practice, she became registered as a professional engineer, and later on as a consulting engineer. And she went back to the institute where she came from, and she rose to become the chief executive of the institution. So she had focus. She knew what she wanted. If she had remained with her routine work, she would have rotted there professionally. So the other question is from Christopher I don't see properly the surname. Is this Njala or Njalila or something like that? So he says about the pyramid, he says big problem. Instead of giving professional people, okay, I'll read how it is written. Big problems instead of giving professional people and handled by politicians, and they give solutions. I don't know what this means, but what he's trying to say, the question is, are we still leaving politicians to grab our responsibility? We don't tell them. Now, I would say that if you are an engineer who has taken oath, then you stand up by the professional ethics. If it is something which is being forced on you, which is not professional, just stand your ground and say no. There was a young engineer, a lady in Tabora, who stood up against the RC, then engineer RC, Mr. Mwandri, and Mr. Mwandri really appreciated. So if you don't stand up and you let them move you around, they will do so, but stand up your ground. At the end of the day, you'll be responsible, not the politician. The second part of the questions is, in my position, we do design, but the seniors decide out of the design might be not enough money, etc. Why should I continue utilizing myself much? Okay, it seems this guy is despaired, but design is an iterative process, and it's also a value for money kind of process. So if your boss does not accept your design 100%, it should not be something to make you unhappy, but actually to find the reason. Maybe he has more experience and he knows that you can do a rational design better. The last question comes from Engineer Jefferson Nko, and he says the author tells us that the creativity and conventional professional engineers is the spirit and the attitude of individuals. So I think the question is, what are the strategies proposed by the author to address those important attributes of the human being, and particularly the engineers, for enhancing the skills? Well, I think it is through this kind of training one will be alert, convinced to have a different outlook or a different way of thinking. As you rightly say, these are human attributes, very, very dependent on the individuals. But through this kind of trainings, it will help people realize their potential, or even what path they should take to achieve their potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Manga, for responding so well. Due to the interest of time, and we have some other presentations to be carried out, I will now pass on a leading question to Engineer Kiabo, that for a sustainable construction industry and industrialization, the integral review of ethics and integrity is often questioned. What is your experience with other developing countries, and what should the mitigating efforts be?
I think I have a question of that kind. Is it duplicated? Okay, thank you so much. Let me try to respond as per my list here, and then I'll come to the question that has been posed to me by the chair of this session. Let me start with the question from Engineer Job Elman Mwantinde. The question is, as per presentation during Mwenge session, a good number of projects are being rejected. Reason being corruption. I agree. What about the following factors contribution to the poorly executed projects. 1, politics. Second, ratio of technician to engineers in Tanzania being low. Ladies and gentlemen, let me repeat again. I said the cited projects do not mean that are all rejected through the corruption practices only. There may be some factors, but the perception of the public, if you go to slide number 4, you will see I wrote perceived indicators of corruption, not proved. For the consumption of this congregation, that is to alert you that we may have the problem of corruption in such projects. So this is a perception, not a confirmed one. Don't quote me wrongly. It is a perception from the public. On the other side, politics. Through my presentation, one of the sources of corruption, I cited project interference by government officials. Most of them are politicians. And for that case, that may be the source of corruption, or failure of the projects, and corruption as well. And again, the ratio of technicians to engineers. This is very obvious. The ratio may not be acceptable, but that could not be the only reason for poor performance of the projects which we are trying to discuss here. Another question is from Engineer Mrema. Only understanding. PCCB are legally allowed to access any entity. Why they need memorandum of understanding? There are some parts which I have not been able to read, but the question is, if PCCB is fully mandated by the Prevention and the Combating of Corruption Act to fight corruption in this country, why memorandum of understanding between PCCB and the ERB or IET and the other entities? Let me take you back to the functions of PCCB. The first function is to raise public awareness on the evils of corruption and how the public can come on board in the fight against corruption in general. Secondly, we have the function of strengthening systems through studies and provide some opinions or recommendations for better carrying of the government issues to remove the loopholes of corruption in the procedures in parastatal or government entities. The last one is to investigate and prosecute the offenders of corruption. So don't let us not go straight to assume that every function of PCCB is to arrest people and to take to the court of law. No, we have the function of educating and strengthening of systems. So on the part of community awareness programs and the strengthening of systems, we may cooperate with various stakeholders like ERB, IET, and the other associations to make sure that we have a common understanding in the form of capacity building so that we can all understand the dimensions of corruption and then get rid of it out from the system we are working in. So this requires the collective effort to work together. And this can be achieved only through formal cooperation like memorandum of understanding and the like. Okay. Another question is from Engineer Fabian. Question number 1. You outlined the intervention of government officials at the source of corruption. What is the way forward to avoid it? I have posted several measures to eradicate corruption. This may not be adequate. So we expect you also to give us some inputs so that we can do better in this area. Question number 2. What is your opinion to detention of engineers behind the bars by government officials on allegations of corruption before proof? What a great question. Anyway, let me put it aside. I'll come back to you. Thank you so much. Another question is from Jefferson Nko on paper of corruption. Some projects have been cited as being too expensive as a result of corruption practices. The cited projects include the DMDP in Temeke municipality in Dar es Salaam at a cost of 5.5 billion Tanzanian shillings. Following the allegations of the corruption practices, have the responsible organs conducted detailed and professional investigations to confirm the allegations? The case is already in court, and for that case, let me not go further to explain more on that, but it was just indicative to show that some of our projects have a problem of too high costs. Another question is from anonymous engineer who asked for a sustainable construction industry and industrialization. The integral review of ethics and integrity is often questioned. What is your experience with other developing countries, and what should be mitigating efforts? Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to page number 65 up to 75 of the proceedings, you will see my full paper in length. The paper has taken various factors from various countries with different economic status, culture, and the like. But the findings have been compared to the condition we have here in Tanzania. And all of them are showing the relatively the same correlation, although not proved statistically, but conceptually, almost the developing countries have the same problem. For that case, we need collective efforts. That is why we have the cooperation of one nation to another, because corruption is a transnational offense. It goes beyond our borders. So we have the same problem worldwide. No country can say it has no corruption. The state we have here in Tanzania, it can be found in Kenya and other countries, as you have shown. Another question from Anonymous on skills and corruption. To enhance engineer skills and professional, why don't ERB, CRB, and the Ministry of Works introduce and enforce the law that requires all buildings, especially in towns and cities, to be approved and supervised by professional engineers? This includes multi-story building and normal building to increase engineers' employment sharing skills. Although the question is directed to PCCP, but I think this should go to ERB and the Ministry of Works, as has been cited. But for PCCB, we can do something more. We can look on the system, how it works, to get valid findings so that we can advise the ministry or ERB accordingly. So I'll take this as an assignment to work on, and maybe later on we can come back and give the feedback. Another question is from Engineer Ojoro, member of IET and a professional engineer. Is the rejection of projects by Mbio za Mwenge follows any engineering procedures on forensic procedures or forensic procedures to be documented by this higher fraternity? I propose, brothers, to avoid blurring the boundaries of professionalism as usual. Presenter could have quoted from PCCB cases or investigation, PPRA, audit reports, CAG, forensic studies, etc., etc., etc. Yours, Engineer Ojoro. Thank you so much. You know, this paper is all after professionalism. If you go through the paper, you can see it is adopted or adapted the semi-systematic literature review. This is acceptable only using reputable journals which are published internationally. I could use these sources as you have cited. It is possible, but I thought the Mbio za Mwenge projects have public interest. They take a sound too far away because everything is seen by the public. I thought to share with you under these boundaries, but the sources we have quoted are very good, and maybe in the future we can use the sources as we have suggested, but this does not jeopardize the use of the Byozamwenge projects as you have said. Another question is from anonymous engineer. Oh, Celestine Mahubi or Malubi, I don't know, but the handwriting is also not very, very clear to me. I wonder why the presenter started the presentation by narrating various projects which were rejected during Uhuru Torch movement. Can you tell us how many projects were rejected because of corruption and poor performance? Because others were rejected simply because no letter from the ministry to disburse the funds, and some were rejected because of political will. Back again to slide number 4. These are perceived indicators of corruption, not confirmed indicators of corruption. Perception is allowed because in a democratic country, everyone is free to say anything, provided he doesn't break the law. So these perceptions can be a awakening message to us that there might be some sort of corruption or not. So we have to evaluate ourselves to make sure that we go in the straight line as far as professionalism is concerned. Yes. Another question is from Engineer Abdul Awadi. How does PCCB encourage transparency in the construction sector? The initiative called COST, Construction Sector Transparency Initiative, aims at increasing transparency and encouraging the public to demand for explanations when there are only signs of corruption. Does PCCB recognize this initiative? The answer is yes, because these are one of our stakeholders that we need to work with, the public in general and other institutions like ERB and others. Although we may not have maybe some MOUs or whatever, but we understand the presence of this initiative. And the PCCB, we are in the front line to make sure that we fight corruption in the country through various means, as I've explained, but we need the public to come on board so that we can eradicate this scourge altogether along the way for benefit of our country. I think I have responded to most of the questions. I'm not sure if I've left one, and if I've left it, it is just by accident, not deliberately. You will forgive me. And having said so, another one, sorry, Chair. Another one is for the projects which rejected in various areas due to poor performance. Are there any action or punishment taken to the engineers involved in those projects? Question from Engineer Musiba. I may not have some statistics, and this is a surprise as well. I didn't expect this question, but Engineer Musiba, if you can give me your contacts, I may come back to you later so that I can give you clarification, clarify to you so that you can understand what is going on. Thank you, Chair, for this time.
Thank you very much. A huge round of applause for Engineer Garbo. I'm sure that the two presenters have caught your attention and interest, because from here where I sit, I can see that everybody was very actively listening to both of you. We have received some more questions. However, we cannot go through all the questions. We will be responding to you individually, either through our website or be writing back to you, so please bear with us. However, just to summarize and wrap up this session, both ERB and IET are looking at mentor and mentee relationship, and this documentation is going to be produced very soon, and you'll be receiving that. Further to the group training and virtual training platform, IET is going to run continued professional development programs every second week in many areas of our profession. We will request that all engineers please register when the call for registration is made. There was one question or two questions for ERB, which will be later on tackled by them. We will ask them to respond. But yes, there was a suggestion as well by Engineer Assad that there are engineers who give out their stamps, professional stamps to others. This is not fair. This is not a good practice. And he has mentioned that stern action should be taken, which we also agree. Further to that, once again, I would like to close this session by thanking you all for your attention, and I request a huge round of applause for our two presenters. Asanteni sana.
Asante. Asante sana mwenyekiti. Na tunashukuru, na kwa kutumia forum hiyo naomba nitoe tangazo dogo kutoka kwa wanawake wahandisi in line with the capacity building we had been taught about in the whole session. Kwenye ile program ambayo Engineer Upendo alifanya asubuhi kutoka Women Chapter wa IET, tayari detailed survey ilishafanyika, usanifu umekamilika, cost estimates ziko tayari, pamoja na idhini zote kwa ajili ya usanifu wa awali na umekamilika, na sasa hivi tu ambayo inaendelea ni official launching, maandalizi yake yanaendelea. So tutawaomba wahandisi tofauti tofauti ambao mko hapa, when you'll be outreached kwa ajili ya kuenhance skill na capacity building, tafadhali tunaomba uwepo wenu. Tafadhali naomba mengi tena kwa ajili ya mwenyekiti Engineer Kadri pamoja na timu yake. Asante. Tunaingia kwenye session ya mwisho ambayo itakuwa ni session ya 5 kabla ya kwenda break ya lunch, na hii inahusiana na issue ya recommendation na observation on the overall conference we had, na hii itaongozwa na Engineer Professor Mengisen Kaseva. Tafadhali naomba mengi kwa Engineer Mengisen Kaseva. Profesa yeye naye ndo mwenyekiti wa kamati yetu ya mkutano wetu wa 31. Yeye ni professor from Ardhi University, ana PhD in Environmental Engineering kutoka hapo Ardhi University. Profesa, unaweza ukaja mbele tafadhali. Ana masters ya Environmental Engineering kutoka nako Ardhi University, na Bachelor of Science from the same university, na ni engineer wa mambo ya mazingira wa muda mrefu na mkongwe. Tafadhali profesa, nakukaribisha pamoja na timu yako ambao nitakuomba nako unisaidie kuitambulisha. Mengi kwa ajili ya profesa pamoja na timu yake.
Okay. Delegates, good afternoon. Now, this is a session where we are going to present the report, and this is a report which has been compiled by a team of people. They were sitting in front there, and the members of the team that prepared this report include Engineer Kasera, he is currently not here, Engineer Lema, Engineer Kimaka, and Engineer Abelin, and myself. And we have tried as much as possible to capture the key issues of what transpired yesterday, day 1, as well as today, very little is captured from the previous presentation, but I hope we shall later on put it also in our report. This report is this is a draft report, and is going to be presented by Engineer Zahir Lema. He's here. And can you now to the podium, Engineer? Engineer Zahir Lema is a graduate from Dodoma University, and he is a petroleum engineer. After his presentation, we will welcome comments from the delegates. We are not expecting questions, but essentially comments so that we can eventually improve. Take your comments, which will be an input into the final report. Engineer Martin and Ayu and Lema, are you ready to present? 1 second, okay.
Duplicate. I think it's done. Okay. This one. Okay. Can I proceed? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zaire, as I've been introduced by Professor Engineer Kaseva. I'll go through the rapporteur's report for this conference. This is the 31st National Conference, which was carried out from December 2nd to 4th, 2021 at Ngurdoto Mountain Lodge. As a preamble to the conference, it is an IT constitutional requirement to hold either a national or international conference in the first week of the month of December each year. The aim of this conference is to provide a platform for engineers, technicians, and allied field to meet and discuss engineering issues as guided by the theme and the sub-theme. For this year, the conference theme title, The Role of Engineering in Racketeering, the National Development Trajectory through Industrialization for a Perpetual National Middle-Income Economy. The theme, together with the appropriate sub-themes, aim to address resilient issues that range from the infrastructure, environment, agriculture, economy, industrial integration, technology to capacity building. The first day of the conference began on Thursday, 2nd December. This year, around 1,200 engineers have attended the conference. With statistics compared to last year, it's almost twice the number of attendees in the last year conference. Engineer Said Kadri, the IET president, welcome the chief guest, Engineer Professor Makam. Challenge, key solution is innovation in different areas of telecommunication industry. The government should also introduce policies and strategies that aim to wider digital transformation and the digital economy. The country should modernize and expand the national ICT backbone. Operators should adapt technology that are robust and not inherently coverage limited. The following are possible implementation agents for the above resolution: TCRA, Ministry of Communication and Information Technology, operators, universities and research institutions with regard to innovation. The second paper, titled A Novel Approach for Utilization of Dar es Salaam City Domestic Waste and Source of Energy as a Source of Energy Production. The paper has been authored by Engineer G. Lukinja and G. Mrema and was presented by Engineer Lukinja. The paper aimed to propose a scientific approach on how to manage high volume of solid waste generated in Dar es Salaam and to analyze the different waste to energy pathway that can be deployed as a sustainable energy source. The following are observations from the rapporteurs. The author observed that only 40% of solid waste in Dar es Salaam is collected, leaving behind 60% unmanaged solid. Author related the health and environmental hazard associated with the unmanaged solid waste, which jeopardize the ecology of the city and human life. The following are the resolution from the above observation. Appropriate technology can be deployed to treat the waste and use as a source of sustainable energy to the rapidly growing city of Dar es Salaam. The third paper, titled Converting Non-Coking Coal to Metallurgical Coke for Iron Making in Blast Furnace for Improving Iron Industry in Tanzania. The paper has been authored by Engineer Hiji, Mdee, and Semboja, and was presented by Engineer Hiji. The paper aimed at assessing technology, converting the available coal in Tanzania to metallurgical coal for blast furnace iron making to meet the local and East Africa iron making and steel markets. The following are observations from the presentation. The proximate properties and ultimate properties from Ngaka coal, tan coal, suggest that the coal is non-coking properties and can only be used directly in blast furnace if it is converted to metallurgical coke. The following is the resolution. The exploitation of Liganga and Mchuchuma iron ore deposits should hasten to provide a local market for non-coking, but also university and different research institutions and centers to continue to assess the appropriate technology on utilizing the available coal in Tanzania to metallurgical coal for blast furnace iron making to meet the local East Africa iron and steel markets. The third session themed cross-cutting issues. This session was chaired by Engineer Mugashigwe, the asset president. One paper was presented during this session. The title of the paper, Non-Communicable Disease, Hypertension, and COVID-19. The paper has been authored by Dr. Ruhagisa and Dr. Wanyika, but was presented by Dr. Muhabuki. The paper aimed to provide awareness on non-communicable disease, hypertension, and COVID-19. Some of the aspects covered in the presentation of hypertension disease are cause of hypertension, signs and symptoms of hypertension, management of hypertension, and treatment of hypertension. Some of the aspects covered during the presentation of COVID-19 are Tanzania COVID-19 experience and COVID-19 control measures, particularly vaccination protocol. The following observation: engineers actually are aware on the matter related to their health and are ready to take an advice. Groups that are highly at risk to hypertension include separated, divorced, widowed, smokers, alcoholic, and overweight. COVID-19 is a pandemic that has no boundary and it affects both gender and all ages. Based on the above observation, the following are recommended resolutions. Relevant authority to increase the awareness program with regard to hypertension disease and COVID-19. Engineers and society in general to adhere to the recommendation and measures against COVID-19 as stipulated by the government and WHO. But also engineers and the society in general to get vaccinated, as vaccination reduces severity of COVID-19 disease. That was all about day one of the conference, and today began the second day. The second day began with the exhibitors presentation. We had a presentation from SICA, Institution of Construction Technology, ICOT, Interconsult Limited, and CRDB. But also we had a presentation from Women Chapter, Tawese, Following the presentation, began the session 4 themed Engineering, Training and Capacity Building. This session was chaired by Engineer Kadri, the IT President, on behalf of Engineer Mpembe. 2 papers were presented. The first paper titled Skill and Proficiency of Professional Engineers in Tanzania Through Work. The second paper titled Corruption in Construction Industry and Emerging Economies, Sources, Effect and Intervention in Construction Projects. However, the key issues from the presentation have been captured by the rapporteurs, but have not been included in this presentation. They shall be included in the final rapporteur's report. Based on the following report, the following is the way forward. Based on the comments on the conference participants, we shall prepare the final rapporteur's report and will provide input to the detailed conference report for this year. The report shall include conference resolutions that shall be forwarded to the government for possible implementation. Based on that, thank you for your attention.
Delegates, can I now welcome the comments? And as I said, we need to improve this before we get the final report. If there are specific questions for the papers that were presented, we shall still we shall forward them to the respective paper presenters, get their answers, and maybe include them in our report. But for the time being, please, if there are any comments, this is the time.
Yeyote ambaye ana maoni na input. Engineer Martin anapita.
Yes, my name is Engineer Mrema. First, I wish to commend the rapporteurs for very brilliant work this far, as they have always done. My first suggestion is, perhaps it's obvious, editing the areas where some words which will need generality and they have been specific, like observes instead of observe, or observe instead of observes. I think this will not require much work. But on the outset of this presentation, I read somewhere they say resolutions and recommendations. My suggestion is that we delineate, we differentiate. As a caption, when we say resolution and recommendation, then one expects to see resolution first and recommendation second, if indeed they are different. But if we mean resolution and recommendation to be the same, one and the same thing, I think then we need just to use one word, just resolution. Because the presenter in the end said, we are going to send these resolutions. It appears as if resolutions and recommendations have been used interchangeably. If that is the case, then we don't need the caption in the beginning, resolution and recommendation. We don't need it. But what I believe is perhaps resolution and recommendation are used, or maybe we want to use them to mean different things, whereby we're emphasizing that resolution is actually our own opinion of this conference. But resolution is is our suggestions or perhaps our proposals to the higher body. If that is the case, then let us make that clear in what we are proposing as resolution, so that one understands these resolutions are just for the purpose of the meeting. Those who participated, the participants, these are their opinions. But recommendation, then it's their suggestions or our suggestion or our recommendation, our suggestion or our proposal to the higher body. So I think we need to be clear on the two words and give them their due respect. If we mean resolution and recommendation different, then let us indicate at every session what were the session resolutions and what are the session recommendations to higher bodies. If we are using them interchangeably, then let us just use recommendations everywhere and not recommendation and resolution at the same time, which can confuse the reader. Thank you.
Asante sana mhandisi. Tutaenda kwa approach ya kuchukua opinions kama 5, alafu wenzetu watatusaidia kutupa feedback. Engineer Martin anapita na mic. Yeyote ambaye ana input, tafadhali naomba unyoshe mkono. Yeyote ambaye ana input, basi labda niombe profesa tuweze kuiattend hiyo.
I have one. Rapporteur team, I think Interconsult has not made any presentation. They will make it after. So it is not correct to say they've made the presentation. They are yet to make one. I'm saying Interconsult has been reported that that we've made a presentation as sponsors, but we are yet to make that presentation. We'll do it later.
Asante. Kuna mwingine yeyote kabla sijarudisha kwa profesa? Naona hapana. Karibu prof.
Martin, Engineer Martin, there is something you said yesterday. Is it yesterday or today? About Interconsult, and maybe you are saying it was very short or it's not adequate. Oh.
No, it's written that we've made the presentation as sponsors, but we are yet to make one.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
we will
fine.
make it later.
Fine.
Yeah.
But I think Engineer G.D. Mrema, we have taken note of your comments. The first one is essentially editorial, and this is, what we have here is current, just very, very draft, actually zero draft. We are going to have the first draft, and by the time we have the final one, it will actually be very free, clear of all the editorial works. But we thank you for your comments. This one, the other one, this is a resolution against recommendations. I think it's also a good comment. We are taking it, but I think the key issue here is the recommendations. What are we recommending? What are we going to tell? What are the conference recommendations that we think the government can implement? That is the key issue. Otherwise, we shall also look into resolutions, and we have captured your comments, and we think it's useful. We shall address it accordingly. We thank you very much.
Engineer Wadhi, karibu.
Thank you. Hello? Yes. Mr. Chairman, just a proposal that when making this report and coming up with recommendations, we should be very specific. We should be very specific as to who the recommendation is directed to, so that it is not left for everybody to think somebody else will attend to that. That will make our report more presentable, and it will add value to it. Thank you.
Be very specific.
Kuna mwingine? Asante, karibu.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Engineer Rocky Sabigoro. Yes, as we have seen, we normally have the resolution and recommendations. And we have said the recommendations sometimes, or in most cases, are going to be presented to the higher authorities, especially the government, for implementation. I wish to suggest that in these papers also, we extract what we call the practical issues, and these practical issues should be implemented by we engineers, if possible. that in every paper that is presented, together with the resolutions and the recommendations, we extract also the practical issues that should be implemented by we engineers. And in the next meeting coming, we should be able also to reflect on what were the achievements of those practical issues. I don't know if I have made myself clear. Thank you.
Asante. Yeyote mwingine tafadhali? Karibu Prof.
No more questions. Okay. I thought you asked another professor there to. So it's me to respond. So anyway, I do get the name of the participant there, but I think he's talking about the issue that GD Mrema raised, issue of using interchangeable recommendation and solutions. And this one, I said we are going to look into it and perhaps sort out resolutions and then recommendation. And then you are, which also I agree with you, to extract the practical issues from each paper. And if you noted, we have all started in the presentation there. We indicated the possible institution to implement. But this one, we are going to expound it further, as you said, and then go from each paper and see and sort out what you. So actually, we are taking your comment and see how we can take it in our report.
Asante sana. Kuna yeyote mwingine wakati tunafunga? Okay, karibu.
Okay. Thanks for the report, rapporteur's reports. Engineer Bujuru, thanks for the rapporteur reports. Good, but as you said, the professors, you said this is the zero draft. Do we have any chance of reviewing looking at it when you have done the recommendations or the review we have made here? And also we can see the flow as well, because sometimes there are edits which need to be done. Names, I thought they were spelled, some of them were spelled wrongly, and so forth and so forth. Thank you.
Karibu Prof.
I did not get it very clearly, but it's like you are saying that there are some editorial issues.
Engineer was asking, because we said that this one is a draft version, are we going to give them opportunity to go through the final version and there are some correction in the names of the presenters and all that?
The procedure is that we are going to handle these comments, prepare a report, and we shall review the report in the committee as well as the secretariat. The idea of, again, submitting this to the participants, we have always, I hope you have always trusted that the committee and secretariat will handle this to the final stage, up to when we have very final and well edited report.
Asante Prof. Kuna lingine nafikiri tumemaliza.
The President would like to respond further about that question.
Okay.
Please, let's allow him.
Thank you very much. It was a very good question. Once we get this report and the resolutions edited by the respective committee, it will come to the council. We are going to ratify it. And then for the engineers, we will put it on our website for a limited period so that they can look at it, give their comments. Thereafter, we'll proceed. Thank you.
Asante mwenyekiti, that's for IR. Nafikiri tumemaliza na naomba nishukuru kwa ushirikiano na nishukuru sana timu ya Prof for the hard work we've done. Before we move to our closing, for the closing remarks na announcements chache, kwanza tunawa encourage waandishi kupitia katika mabanda yetu ya exhibition, the booth they are just there when you enter. Kingine ni kwamba tunaomba mfanye registration katika booth pale ya IET. It's very important for the PDUs and all those other things. Kingine kwa naomba kusema pick up points. Tunashukuru watu wengi wamefanya turn up kwa ajili ya kwenda kwenye National Parks Tour, na naomba tu kwa haraka kabla ya breaking niziseme. Kwa ambao wataenda Tarangire, pick up point itakuwa ni Arusha Technical saa 12:30. Tarangire